Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Fidus Keep Your Product Roadmap on Track during COVID-19 webinar. We've got a good amount of attendees that have joined us, and I think it's a good point in time for us to kick things off. It is without a doubt, we have all been impacted by the pandemic, both personally and professionally. We're all dealing with whatever our new normal is almost every day. The Fidus team hopes that this session will assist you in navigating outsourcing as a solution to mitigate threats due to COVID to your company's productivity and electronic product development roadmap. Outsourcing is a great solution, but only if it's done right. In this webinar, we'll hear from Fidus product development experts who will share how outsourcing some or all of your project can get you back on track, restore productivity, boost morale, and allow you to focus on your company's core competencies. We'll also hear from a customer/partner who will lend their voice to the benefits of nearshoring and partnering with Fidus. And we're delighted you're able to spend an hour with us today. My name is Veronica Farmer. I'm a member of the marketing communications team at Fidus, and I'll be your moderator for the session. I'll endeavor to keep us on track, especially when we get into our Q&A. Before I get into introduction of our speakers, I'd like to review briefly some of the housekeeping items. You'll find, attendees, that your video is off and your mics are muted. It's not that we wanted to silence you, it's just a little easier to manage that way. This session will be recorded and available to attendees post the session. You can ask a question at any time, although we'll reserve the actual responding to the final portion of the session. You're going to find at the bottom of your screen in the Q&A box in the features bar, you'll be able to input your questions. You'll note too that there's the chat, although I think we've disabled it. So use the Q&A box for sure to raise your questions. Another important note, the questions are only visible to the speakers. We'll monitor them and answer them in order of receipt, and any questions that we do not get to during this session, we'll definitely follow up with you directly to respond. We'll also be posing 3 questions via polling, which will give us some real-time results depending on the responses. These responses are anonymous. You'll see a pop-up box, which you can respond to the polling. And by the way, it'll disappear once you answer, or we'll remove it after just a few minutes of the polling. And listen, if there's any issues, please use the Q&A box. We'll do our best to assist you. So moving on to introductions, I do want to acknowledge our CEO, Alan Cody of Fidus. When he's not rappelling down buildings for charity, he's actively engaged with customers. I needed to say that because he's kind of a superhero for some of us. For the remaining time, our other superheroes are 3 wonderful speakers. From the Fidus team, we'll hear from Cameron Redman, Executive VP of Sales, and Scott Turnbull, our Director of Technology. Also presenting will be Albert Cudahy, Regional Sales Manager of Avnet Electronics. We'll then turn into Q&A and wrap things up on time at 2 p.m. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Cameron. As Fidus's EVP of Sales, Cameron leads the sales organization and team, corporate partnerships, and various sales channels. His focus is laser, growing sales to support corporate objectives, as well as evaluating opportunities in new markets and segments. He's also the general manager for Kitchener-Waterloo Design Center. I'd also like to introduce my favorite techie, Mr. Scott Turnbull. Throughout his career, Scott has been motivated by playing a key role in new product development. As Director of Technology at Fidus Systems, he's responsible for the design of our internal R&D programs, providing technical guidance and oversight on various internal and external programs, and a complex electronic system and detailed hardware design. Cameron and Scott, you gentlemen now have the mic as we launch into our intro, our Fidus intro, and about outsourcing. Take it away, Cameron.
Great, thank you very much, Veronica. I also wanted to thank our clients, prospective clients, partners that are calling in today, interested parties, and even some employees that are excited to see how it all works behind the curtain, I guess. You might be a little bit surprised. I deal with clients every single day for a couple decades now at Fidus. and probably about 15% actually pretty much ask for advice on how to outsource. So that's part of what's behind how to do it, what outsourcing is, what insourcing is, what nearshoring is, all that sort of thing. We want to just demystify it for you. It's something we deal with on a regular basis and have been doing for a long time, and pride ourselves in being able to help our clients and partners be able to be successful with our inputs. So just a little bit about Fidus to begin. We've been around for approximately 20 years, established in 2001. We specialize, and the taglines are sort of around electronic product development, electronic design services. Basically we're looking to be able to help take you from concept through to functional prototypes in a quick and efficient manner with a high degree of success. We focus on the upper end, I'd say probably about the upper 30th percentile from a technical complexity perspective. So that leads us to the industries you'd see here: communications, datacom, telecom, semiconductor, a lot of storage and acceleration these days, military and defense across North America. Seeing more industrial these days, actually, as communication speeds and needs are requiring more bandwidth at a faster pace than historically, and a lot of medical device and imaging type products, as well as consumer and government. 2001, again, when we were established, our headquarters was founded in Ottawa, Canada. As a lot of you would know, we also have a design center that we opened here in Waterloo a number of years ago, and also in the Bay Area. So again, one thing that will be the crux of today's conversation is design partners and the benefits of having them fairly close by to be able to help on those complex projects that are coming down the road. We've grown quite a bit over the years. We're up to just over 100 folks, 75 closing in on 80 full-time employees, ranging, we'll see in a further slide sort of what some of those skill sets are, but basically 1/3 hardware, 1/3 software, and 1/3 FPGA and signal processing. We also have a very competent and well-known signal and power integrity group. And over the last 2 years, we've actually added ASIC design with Alan Cody coming on board from IDT, now Renesas. We've added a significant bandwidth on the UVM verification side and the package design, and more the ASIC side of the business. So not only are we doing the eval platforms like we did historically in the early days of 2001, 2002, but now we're working on it at a chip level as well. Track record, again, when you're looking for an outsourcing partner is key. We have a very high success rate. We have a very high repeat business and referral rate, and we've done well over 3,000 projects for, I would say, close to 500 clients at this point over the last 19 years. So moving on to the next slide, this, contrary to popular opinion, isn't a pure sales exercise. So what I wanted to do here, this is a slide from our normal deck. We'll work our way around it. What I really wanted to talk about here was when you're looking to select an outsourcing partner, there's a few different ways you want to address it. One is sort of from the service base and the quality and what's the fit with the organization, and that's what I'll talk about on this slide. The next slide will talk a little bit about the depth within the organization and the skill sets that are being brought to bear, and then we'll get into how you can mix and match to come up with the best solution for your particular organization. So we start with project and program management, not the first thing you necessarily think of when you come to a high-tech services company, but what we will, again, talk about further in the presentation will center around communication is key. The further you go away across time zones, et cetera, different working cultures, et cetera, the more challenging that becomes. It's not something that can't be overcome, but the further away and the more lines of communication, the more chance for cross communication, and it just becomes more challenging and takes more time to get the same outcome. You also want to be evaluating the partnerships that your outsourcing partner has. Partnerships are reflective of a company's ability to invest. Partnerships are not one way, they're investments in both directions. An obvious example would be the partnership that we have with Avnet, the partnership that we have with Xilinx. In the early days of Fidus, it was very much Fidus gives a few customer names and we get to use a Xilinx logo as a for instance. Since then, Fidus has invested, probably millions, for sure hundreds of thousands of dollars in the last 5 to 7 years as a premier member of Xilinx, and also working closely with Avnet and other partners there. We do have other partners that we've established, but when you look at our partner page, it's very clear that we've been around for a while. We have a good reputation. Folks like Xilinx, Avnet, ADI, et cetera, don't partner with people like Fidus on the smaller side unless they have a good reputation and are able to deliver and make their lives easier and help them succeed in their business. And that's something that certainly you can transition and transfer over to, you know, at least again, on a checklist. It's something that if there's strong partnerships, you can certainly be in a position to assume that they did it for a reason and they should be high up on your list depending on the quality. Leading edge tools, again, not every, you don't have to have a Lamborghini to lay out a two-layer board. However, again, from a Fidus perspective and depending on your particular perspectives, most likely if you're on this call, you're doing fairly complex things. If people have inexpensive, free, questionable tool practices with how they implement and distribute them across the company, that is also an indication, one, of trustworthiness. There's lots of ways that you can, you know, rip off CAD tools, but that doesn't make it right. You know, Fidus invests, I would say, approximately $500,000 a year in CAD and simulation tools with the likes of Mentor, Cadence, and others, HFSS and ADS, and all those good expensive tools that provide a lot of value. They come with a cost. But again, you want to be engaging with somebody that does things right. They engage above the table. There's no shenanigans. And you want the quality of those tools to be capable of doing the work that you potentially want your partner to be able to undertake. Same applies to manufacturing. Again, to the outsourcing, we do a lot of manufacturing. We call it strategic because traditionally we were mostly taking designs to first functional sort of 3 to 5 prototypes. We now take it pretty much as far as the client wants down the line towards NPI. We do engage primarily with North American based manufacturers, whether that's PCB fab in our particular case or assembly, whether it's folks like TTM or you know, Urtec or Microart or those sorts of folks on the assembly side in Toronto or Sigma Point. Again, for the same reasons that we will argue later, that near sourcing versus offshoring is a good way to go if you're in a position to do so and it makes sense. We do that as well. We don't have time in our quick turn process with complex boards to be, you know, doing 20-layer boards in Asia and doing 5-day turns or 3-day turns on a bare PCB, for instance. So again, risk, communication, and time, it makes sense to make some trade-offs and have it done in Cornwall or Toronto or you know, somewhere in the US that's relatively close with overnight shipping, or you can drive over, see what's going on, work with your partners, and get things moving. Another thing, we call it products here. I'll lump IP in with that as well, because a lot of you would be interested in that. So whether it's a hardware product or an IP software product, again, the ability to, one, use that as a starting platform for your custom design, or to be able to leverage the actual intellectual property or the design in order to give yourself a jump start and get going. An example with Fidus, we have a Sidewinder card, which is a PCIe 4.0 storage accelerator card with a Honkin UltraScale Plus on it. We have a number of people that come to us. They'll pay us a one-time fee for access to the design files, which we invested on our own years ago. We use that as a starting point, and then we can rip out what they don't need, change the form factor, keep the critical areas, de-risk the project. It ends up being lower risk, lower cost, quicker time frame, and everybody's able to win from that sort of a situation. So again, quality of the IP and the IP or design files and products that are applicable to what you're doing are a good indication of, one, that they've done it before, and also, two, that you might be able to leverage something that they've done before to your benefit. The last on this slide, again, sort of when evaluating the fit, would be the breadth of expertise. So if you're a company that's looking for PCB layout, you're only ever going to want PCB layout, and you know that, and you have confidence in that for the next 5 to 7 years, you may or may not need a full service company that can offer from architecture all the way through the design process. However, again, when you move up the complexity curve, a lot of people in our case start with a relatively small PCB layout, 6-week layout, or a 3-week signal integrity project, that sort of thing. And then they come back and they want us to help out on their next full turnkey program. And it just makes it that much easier. So from your ability to engage over a longer period of time, because again, it is an investment in your future when you select this, I will say, outsourcing partner. I said it accidentally earlier. We view our best clients as partner clients because we want to invest together. We want to win together. And that's how we operate as an organization, the same as we do with our partners and so on and so forth. So it gives you that indication. It also gives you an indication as to the company's ability, again, to invest in the things required to be able to bring all of those skill sets to bear. So here, this is normally where I work my way around the wheel, but everybody here is very capable of reading. Again, from an outsourcing versus insourcing perspective, these are the sorts of things you want to look. So the first slide we talked about, sort of at a high level, evaluating a checklist of, is there a fit between the organizations? Do we communicate the same way? Do our tools align? Are we all working with, AVNet, for instance? That sort of thing, making sure we're set up for success. Once we're sure of that, then we go to that next level of granularity. So again, this breaks out from a Fidus perspective. Other companies obviously could be quite different and probably would be a variation on blowing out software into an entire wheel in and of itself. But you can see again from this, project management is central to everything that we do here at Fidus and pulling it together. Every client gets a dedicated program manager, and the amount of effort scales with what's going on and how much and what type of engagement it is. But you can see that it's a very deep company. It's not a layout company in our case that can do go way back and to an OrCAD layout or something like that, or ProTel from the old days, or an Allegro only layout shop. And it's just an indication of stability, right? Because a company can't do all of this. You can dig in later when you audit as to doing versus saying, because those are different. But somebody can't do all of this without significant investment in people, tools, partners, ecosystems, clients, etc. So again, encourage people when you're looking at your outsourcing partners to be doing your due diligence, dig deeper, make sure there's alignment. What can they do that you need right now? What can they do that maybe takes you 30% past where you are, either from a depth of the technical skill set from a technology perspective, or to that next step in your development flow, because you want an outsourcing partner that can grow with you in a perfect world, even if it's not to eventually go all the way from A to Z or Z, depending where you're calling in from. You want somebody that's capable of going beyond your current day needs, because it is, again, an investment, and you want to make sure you can amortize that over as much as possible and give you that flexibility in the future. All right, so now we're off the Fidus stuff. So we're going to move into insider tips on outsourcing. So we're just going to look at some of the definitions, the benefits. We'll get into business models, fears, because everyone's heard the horror stories of things, and sort of how we and others will go about structuring these sorts of engagements. So getting down to the lingo, there's basically two ways of doing this. So you can do it all yourself. So that's insourcing. So your Apple, for instance, you do it all yourself. You don't work with outside vendors to help you with any aspect of design or manufacturing, et cetera. It's all in-house. Very few organizations do that these days. If you go back to the 70s, 80s, people all over Ottawa, for instance, had their own lines and were manufacturing their own boards, as a for instance. But now I know almost nobody who does that as an example. So if you're not doing it all yourself, you're moving to outsourcing. Outsourcing is anything not in-sourced and in-house. So you've got nearshoring, which is effectively anything that you're doing in relatively close proximity. So for the basis of this conversation, either in your town, your state or province, country, certainly we would view it holistically since it's a big market within North America, and then offshoring. Offshoring is typically, again, outside of your country, typically off continent. Usually the major driver, we'll get into more on the math, Scott will talk to that later. Usually the major driver is cost, but as many of you have done at least some of this will know, it's not usually quite as straightforward as an hourly rate. Once you decide what the different types of outsourcing are, nearshoring and offshoring, now you need to look at how you might want to do it. What are the different models? Again, we'll get into this a little bit later, but effectively you have an opportunity to do a turnkey, fully scoped program. So again, that A to Z, you can define where Z is. In our traditional case, again, it was from architecture to functional prototypes on our client desk, doing what they're expected to do. And then there's a la carte, which is more of a staff augmentation, potentially in our case, signal and power integrity consulting, RF consulting, really high-end time enclosure, evaluating signal processing systems in MATLAB, that sort of thing. So tends to be on an hourly basis, tends to be either shorter consulting gigs or longer directed by client gigs. And there's pros and cons to both of those models, depending on what you're trying to do. But those are the black and white of it all. And then usually what we end up in is some form of gray, and gray is where you get the best benefit for you as the client. Because that's where you say that's where you're able to take your needs and meet it up with the skill sets and come up with a creative model that's going to help you meet your end objectives from a cost and a technical output perspective and schedule. Reasons for outsourcing. We'll get to money later, because that's usually the first thing, and that's why people tend to start by thinking of overseas first, because they think of the hourly rate. Core competencies and would be one of them. So when you look at focus, not every team, especially on the upper end of the complexity scale, can be all things to themselves all the time. Fidus, as an example, has 3 full-time dedicated signal integrity and power integrity experts. That's all they do. They're not hardware people that sort of like it, or layout people that do it sometimes or understand it. They're PhDs that really focus on this aspect. I know companies, lots of companies that have a couple hundred people or more, up to 1,000, and have no in-house signal integrity, other than they might have one license of hyperlinks that they let a hardware person use. So again, you can't be all things to yourself all the time. So it can definitely give a lot of focus when you need to bring in a skill set that you just don't have ready access to, but the risk is getting too high and you need to find a way to account for it. This applies even more if you're a startup. Again, I mentioned how much Fidus alone spends on tools a year. Despite that we're near North American, I can guarantee you get an awful lot of Fidus for $500,000. It comes with the tools, as opposed to investing as a small to medium enterprise or a startup, investing a couple $100,000 in tools. You don't even have anybody to run them yet. So again, making that balance of how you deploy your capital. Again, it on an hourly basis, sometimes it sounds a little more expensive than you might hope or expect. However, when you look at what's really included and what that costs and what it would cost to do it for yourself and what it would cost in the long term to be doing it for yourself, the math definitely takes on a different perspective. Getting more done more quickly. Fidus has a very large and diverse team with a lot of depth, as we saw earlier. One of the main reasons that Xilinx selected us as one of the first 3 worldwide design partners about 7 years ago wasn't actually because we were really good at FPGA. That would be the focus part, and that was part of it. It was because we had a lot of people really good at FPGA, but we could also do the full system, and we could take on a number of projects at any given time. They weren't interested at that premier level of having, there's lots of really good 5-person FPGA shops across North America. Nobody will deny that. But at any given time, Fidus has 40 to 50 programs, ranging from 2-day reviews to 16-person turnkey multi-million-dollar programs over the course of a 12-month period, and everything in between. So, as far as doubling up on layouts, doing a system, we don't have to have one hardware person doing it all. We've done many systems where we do a high-speed backplane with one hardware person, an overall program manager, and then a hardware person for each of the PCI cards, doing it all in parallel. And we deliver that all in 6 to 7 months, as opposed to what it might take you to do it in-house. So again, when you've got lots of big guns and you can stack them, you can get a lot of work done really quickly. Excuse me. Access to expertise. Similar to focus, again, this tends to be a little bit more on the consulting side. The focus is a little bit more tied in potentially to your hiring strategy overall. So maybe more on the very competent hardware designer, embedded firmware designer, DSP designer, that sort of thing. The expertise focus, again, this tends to be the really high-end consulting side of the business, in our case at least, and it differs by company. So the signal integrity, the power integrity, RF consulting, that black magic stuff that takes complex, lots of years to learn. It's not something you just sort of know. lots of years to learn, lots of studying, expensive high-end tools, and just hundreds of designs under your belt to get that experience and to be able to do it well and efficiently and make good recommendations. So again, it's very cost effective actually to bring in even at a higher dollar per hour as opposed to staffing up for SI, for instance. I would say to staff up for a good one-person SI team, you're probably from scratch, you're probably looking at an investment, including the individual, between $300,000 and $500,000 just to hire a person, get something like a Sigrity going, maybe an ADS, something like that, and all of a sudden you're in that ballpark. For continuity, that's probably in the US dollar range as well, just because most tools and that sort of thing come in US dollars. Control over your finances. But I mean, the one nice thing when it comes to that is, again, we know what the business is. People that are in outsourcing and near sourcing know what the business is. You come in, you do a job, you do it well, you leave, you come in for the next job, and so on and so forth. So it gives a lot of control to the end client, as opposed to a full-time hiring for everything all the time type model. So, and you can structure things even, again, merging business models to be able to give even more flexibility. And sometimes, usually that's for mutual benefit, not just the client and not just the service provider, and go from there. That also ties in quite nicely with expenses down, morale up. Again, we're coming in, we are a gun for hire. When you hire somebody, at least when Fidus hires somebody, we expect that it's until they no longer wish to work for us for whatever reason, or they decide to retire, it's forever, quote unquote. And that's very different. So again, you can't always hire for everything. If you look at most recession type trends or tech bubbles that we've had since 2000, probably long before, really what ends up happening when there's huge layoffs is that they hire for a certain curve, and then the industry starts to go flat, and you end up with a gap between the hiring curve and the reality. And that's when you end up with 30,000, I won't say company names, you all know who they've been, 20, 30, 50,000 person type layoffs. So again, most companies these days create some sort of a balance between what they outsource from a services of manufacturing, et cetera, perspective, and what they plan to hire on. And what they do is they tend to use companies like Fidus to help manage that gap. If companies are growing really quickly, they will always have a gap. But if it's a difference between having an overshoot of 30% and 15% as a whole, that can be hundreds or thousands of jobs just by having a different strategy. And from a purely selfish corporate perspective, it's a lot less in severance. So we'll just quickly move on to nearshoring versus offshoring. So this again is a subset of outsourcing overall. You can see in green basically where the Fidus offices are. We've got some red arrows going to traditional, whether it's lower cost areas in Asia, whether it's Eastern Europe. Again, it's not that any of these are bad or good. They just all of them come with certain challenges. And certainly we see, and we've structured our business around the benefits of working with clients and see the benefit of staying local, at least for certain types of complexity of design. And you'll see going through Scott's presentation why some of that is. Increased quality and support. It's actually not so much that the quality is that challenging. It's that, again, the further away, it all comes down with quality and especially support to communication. So the further away and the more lines of communication, the more challenging it is to meet those needs. And one thing that I'll spoiler alert on Scott's slide, and we have a number of testimonials from clients in at least certain lower cost regions, it ends up being approximately close enough from a cost perspective, but the labor itself is actually 2, 3, 4x, 3 on average. So it's a third or so less, but it's 3 times as many people, so the money is about the same. But that, from my perspective and on this slide, what that means is you've got a huge number more communication links, and the more links, the more potential for challenges, issues, miscommunication, et cetera. The most efficient communication is a single link, which for complex design isn't really possible. But again, even Fidus locally, we take it and others do very seriously. Everybody has a direct link for their skill sets. And we sign a project, whether it's $20,000, whether it's $2 million, again, that project manager and tech lead are the primary links into that program. And we keep those as clean as possible. We have the client feed into their link. We have Fidus feed into our project management and tech lead links. and then we have the communication between the client and ourselves, and use that to try and aid in any miscommunication. IP protection is probably the scariest thing on the list and what people know most, so I won't dwell on it. But there are IP concerns, either designing in from overseas from a component perspective, certainly from even designing locally and shipping for manufacturing overseas. We've got clients that basically can formally coat their boards before they send them over. If they need final assembly in Asia, they can formally coat them essentially in black tar, so that if you can't reverse engineer it as easily, and you rip it all apart if you start to take it and try to do that. So again, not to be over the top, but there's certainly concerns. There's lots in the press, a lot of which is potentially overblown, but it's definitely a concern, and something, again, the further away it is, the harder it is to keep track of. It's not a whole lot different, with your cottage than with a piece of IP. The further away, the more likely that there could be some potential problems. Cultural alignment is important, again, from a communication perspective. The more aligned you are culturally, technologically, tools-wise, the whole setup, the more likely there is to be success. A lot of people on the calls, if you're mid-level manager folks, sort of hardware manager to director level, again, the savings don't necessarily translate as much for you folks that are doing 2 a.m. calls overseas. CEOs see that benefit, but not necessarily the people that have to participate. So that's something that's challenging and has to be overcome or just accepted. Minimal travel, increased visibility and control. I like this one because I have control issues, but it works nicely for our clients. The more control there is on both sides, and common and understood common control, the more likely you are to have a complex system up and working in the near term. These aren't fluffy ideas out there that just magically happen. It takes a lot of smart people with concise communication that are working towards a common goal, controlling it tightly on a day-by-day basis, and getting something done. And again, as I mentioned, strategic partnerships are key to being able to be successful. And the closer those partners are, the easier it is to be able to get support for a number of reasons. And so that's why we've partnered with the local North American folks from companies like Avnet and that sort of thing. So with that, just to keep it moving along, there are a couple elephants in the room, and it usually comes down to cost. So I'll turn it over to Scott, who will delve into that a little bit and hopefully add some visibility into how the math works on these sorts of things.
Okay, thanks a lot, Cam, and I appreciate you giving me the stuff that can be viewed as controversial.
You're welcome.
Okay, so there are honestly a couple elephants in the room. We've talked a lot about the high levels, about the value of why you would outsource, why you would prefer nearshoring versus far shoring. But we haven't addressed cost. So let's take a look at cost from a project standpoint and the different elements of a project. So first off, let's look at hourly rates. Okay, nothing's too exciting here, right? Offshore rates are always lower. It's interesting to me that, analyzing insourcing costs and seeing the near shoring costs, there's not a huge delta there. There is one, but let's just move on. Travel costs. So of course, closer travel is less expensive. So we'll just mark that down. Travel time. How much time are you spending on a plane, basically being inefficient? Main project schedule. So this is, let's just include everything up to bring up and integration and debug and stuff like that. So the main project schedule, I think pretty much it's fair to say that everybody could deliver something within the schedule as long as they're staffed properly. But let's look at bring up and debug schedule now. This is where we start getting schedule advantages. And this is all because of communication, vicinity, stuff like this. So, you know what, I would never argue that, that nearshoring is going to be exactly the same in this category as insourcing. I think there will be a little bit of a premium attached to it. However, look at the difference between far shoring and near shoring. and this is all to do with timelines, with sending equipment around, certainly in some aspects, capabilities, cultural differences, things like that. So, I have this down as, 25% larger than the insourcing for nearshoring. You know what? It could be even less than that. Okay, let's take a look at quality. We would say that our designers and our interest in delivering a quality product is the same as you have internally. We, like Cameron said, we want long-term partnerships with companies, and we have a lot of referred business. We have a lot of repeat business, and that's because we've been able to demonstrate that. And honestly, I want to be completely fair with these slides. That's not necessarily, unique to Fidus, but it is, I think, unique to nearshoring. Looking at support grades. So who offers the best support? Obviously, if you have your design team in-house, you're going to get the best support. But nearshoring offers a very, very compelling support solution. We have very low turnover at our company. And so the chances of you, needing help in the future and the same people being involved is actually very high. Can't be said with far shoring. Effort to staff the project. So this is how much time, effort, and everything you're spending trying to put together a team to get something done. It's internally, if you have a team and they're sitting around and they're ready to go and they've got the capabilities and there's no higher priority, you would always insource it, no doubt. But this is the scenario where you have multiple conflicting priorities, you don't have the capabilities, stuff like that. So now what you need to do is you need to find a team, whether that be hiring, contracting individually, whatever. So let's just call that effort 1 times. I think it's 4 times easier to hire a nearshoring company like Fidus and costs probably 4 times less to hire them than it does to go and get a far shoring company or to do it yourself. So this is a really key advantage of nearshoring. Now the project's underway. How much of your time, effort do you have to put in to monitor and make sure that you're confident and comfortable with the way that the project is progressing? So I would say 4 times less effort if you have a very confident or competent nearshoring partner than if you're running it in-house. This is typically seen because we have customers that spend 1 hour every 2 weeks on the phone with us, and that's how they get all their information on the project. So these are the kind of things that how I'm coming up with these numbers. Far shoring, I think my inclination would be to keep a very tight leash on something so far away. So this is the 2x multiplier there. And then program contingency. So the amount of risk and variability in a project. If I'm budgeting for a project internally, I might put a 10% plus, contingency fund. I don't want to go back and ask for a bunch of money all the time. Nearshoring, very, very similar, may as well be the same. And then far shoring, like I said, I don't want to go back. So if there's problems, if there's issues, something wasn't understood clearly, communication breakdown, stuff like that, quality issues, I want to make sure that I have a lot more money in the budget than what I think I need. So sort of the message with this is that nearshoring offers the most similar experience to insourcing. So let's take a look at some dollar figures for a project. So this is the kind of thing that most people talk about. Okay, I'm ready to outsource. Now, do I go near shore or far shore or offshore? And offshore, everybody knows is cheaper, but is it really cheaper? So let's take a look and see. So from a labor perspective, clearly cheaper, no surprise there. We looked at the hourly rates. Travel costs, you know what, it's on this type of project, 6-month project, 3 people, you know, it's not huge. Let's look at the effort to staff the project. So once again, this is building a team, because you don't have a team ready to go, or it's not capable, or has higher priorities. So I assigned some times to this. So I think it's, like I said, 4 times less expensive to nearshore. Your time and effort. So this is when the project's underway. Once again, your level of involvement is significantly less. Not because we don't want your level of involvement, not because of anything like that, just because you trust what you're getting. Program risk contingency. So this is where, you know, we had the 10% and the 12% and then the 50 to 100%. This is the budget contingency that I'm asking for if I'm insourcing, if I'm nearshoring, and if I'm offshoring. Team retention. One of the major reasons why people hire nearshoring companies is because they don't want to take the risk hiring people that they can't see a long-term association with. So maybe you need to get a project done, there's too many projects, whatever. But that comes with a cost. It comes with a morale cost, but we're looking at money here too. So this is, you know, parting fees, stuff like that, potentially, if you don't need to keep your team around after your crunch is over. And then the last one, missing market window. You know what, I think you can deliver to your market window if you have the people in-house, absolutely. I think you're taking a big risk offshoring if you have a very tight market window that you're trying to hit. And so actually quantifying that is difficult. I think 500K for most companies for missing market window is probably a drop in the bucket. It's probably significantly larger than that. So let's see what the actual costs of executing a project are. So this totals nearshoring, companies like Fidus, you know, $100,000 more than insourcing. Offshoring, you know, it's $100,000 more than that. But it's those two things we don't know about: missing market window and the team retention that can add up. The point is that nearshoring quickly turns into the least expensive option. So really, at the end of the day, I don't think that there's an elephant in the room with this. I think nearshoring is a compelling solution for both technical reasons, but also a financial case can easily be made for it. With that, we're going to hop into the poll. Is nearshoring attractive to you? So we'll just take like 10 seconds to answer this.
Actually, Scott, I'm going to just do a time check here. We'll have to move through the next slides fairly promptly.
Yeah, for sure.
There we go. I unmuted, so it'll take less time. So there's a few different ways. Again, from a Fidus perspective, we're fairly creative in, well, not that creative, but we're fairly flexible in how we're willing to mix and match these different models. At the end of the day, it really comes down to three different ways. There's time and materials, so hourly. There's fixed price, which is just about as obvious. So there's a fixed scope and a fixed associated cost with it. And then there's the creative model, which, you know, could be anything, but historically for Fidus, it's been royalties. It could be sort of a, you know, venture engineering loan on the back end. If we saw you wanted to invest in that product, we could back end load the design based on your funding requirements, or you know, to mix and match for your capital spend for larger organizations to help the money fall in the right place. In a lot of cases, it's a combination of, like the example I mentioned earlier, there could be some sort of a royalty based on an existing design that we've done for ourselves. possibly an architecture time materials, a fixed price implementation, and a testing phase for mutual verification and bring up, or any combination thereof. So just depends on the type of work, but certainly one thing, regardless of the models, is you want to make sure with whoever you're engaging with from an outsourcing perspective and a nearshoring perspective that that they're flexible to help do the best they can to meet your needs. So that takes us to our next poll, which we'll do quickly. We'll pop it up here, and then we'll move right along so that we respect everyone's time here on the call.
And I'll just give an update on the last poll as a summary. 100% yes to, do you find outsourcing attractive? All right, who's up?
So fears some customers have. So reasons not to outsource, or things people are controversial with. The designers may not be as good as my designers. The thing I like to laugh about is this is actually a two-way street. We believe that that our designers can line up with anyone. Will my team resent or feel threatened if I go outside? Will they steal my IP? Will the company use the knowledge they gain to help my competitors? What if the project is heading over schedule and budget? How will I support this design in the future? What can I do if I don't think things are going well? What will the company ECO me to death if changes come up? What if the company makes a design mistake? Who pays? And is my project finish line the same as the outsourcing company's finish line? So these are some common fears that people talk to us about. The commonality of all of this is all about communication and openness. We have the best relationships with companies that share, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and we share the same type of thing. So you can have these fears, there's nothing wrong with it, but make sure when you sign up for an outsourcing partner, you have a communication and a relationship that answers all of these fears and cancels them out for you. Don't go into something fearful. Okay, next slide, please. So I basically just captured a whole bunch of questions. If you're considering outsourcing, ask your outsourcing partner or the companies that you're talking to these types of questions. I'm not going to go through them right now, but have a look. It can be uncomfortable for sure, but it's a lot better to have that uncomfortable discussion early on and understand where everybody's at than it is later on. So make sure that you do your homework. There's some work to be done, but this doesn't. This stuff you could get a really good sense in an hour or two meeting with a potential partner. Next slide, please. I'm not gonna go through this because we don't have time. But the way that we execute is we do a pre-sales stage where we discuss the project, and then after the pre-sales stage, we go through a project flow. The project flow is very similar to what you'd expect for any type of project. And once again, we're highlighting project management there being a key differentiator. But have a look through this, and this is sort of, when we start talking about things we can do together, the pre-sales flow is what we're working through.
Yeah, and just because Scott wouldn't think that I was paying attention if I didn't interrupt him once, I would argue as well, when you look at doing the pre-sales with your outsourcing partner, I mean, that's basically the, hopefully not too speed dating-y, but that's the get to know the person or people you're looking to potentially engage with. It actually quite nicely aligns up with our architecture implementation and verification delivery model, but you want to take that opportunity to ask all those questions like Scott was saying. Get to know the partner. Do you trust the partner? Understand in a similar way you wouldn't get into a complex ASIC design before you understand the architecture. You shouldn't jump right into you shouldn't be jumping right into talking about, you want to know if you can afford the person, that's fine, talk rate overall as a generality. But you definitely want to understand that you're aligned on more than just the money before you get going. You'd never jump right into a contract the same way you'd never jump right into a design without thinking about it in more detail and having those thought discussions.
Okay, I'm just going to finish with some insider tips here. How do we do things? Developing the estimate. Time and materials projects are estimated by effort multiplied by hourly rate, whereas fixed price jobs are done the same way, but then there's a risk premium applied because it's fixed price. One thing, there will always be some amount of learning required, as nobody knows everything. Don't expect your outsourcing partner to be an expert in all things. The rule of thumb I use is if they get 9 out of 10, then you're probably in a pretty good position. Then with that, what I'm going to do is actually move on, because I want to respect your time. Read those tips though, because they're kind of interesting, I think. And then we'll hear from Albert.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Scott and Cam. So we'll move quickly along. Last but not least, we have Albert from Avnet. Quick introduction, been there for over 20 years, currently the regional sales manager for Ottawa, Montreal Maritime region. Avnet is a global technology solutions provider with an extensive ecosystem delivering design, product marketing, and supply chain expertise for customers at every stage of the product lifestyle. Avnet continues to be a critical part of Fidus's success, extending our reach to our customers, moving swiftly and seamlessly from idea and product concept to volume production. Our Avnet partnership includes global semiconductor partner Xilinx, wherein Avnet is the sole distributor in the Americas for Xilinx. Fidus is also a premier alliance partner. We value and appreciate their exposure and ability to reach and support thousands of customers globally. Albert, please go ahead. I know you've waited patiently.
No, hey, that was an absolutely great introduction, Veronica. Thank you so much. And thanks for the invite, guys. A couple reasons I was pretty stoked and proud to be invited to the webinar of Fidus is we've had a very long-standing partnership with people that are just genuinely good people. And the second reason was I was happy to join something where I could wear something other than a t-shirt. So for the first time in a very long time. So again, thanks for the invite. I'll run through this quickly. So at Avnet, we are a global distributor for Xilinx, and that enables us to touch customers at a very early stage, typically research and concept. We have factory trained engineers that these customers call upon and say, hey, help me recommend an FPGA or an SoC. And our guys are fully on board, engaged early with these customers. And we've talked about the reasons why these customers do pull in Avnet and pull in Fidus. Usually in-house teams are tied up with other priorities. In a lot of cases, we're seeing more and more customers have a great concept and the ability to start the design, but lack the internal expertise to actually create the product. So we get those questions a lot of times from customers saying, help me, who do I go to do this? And obviously as a distributor, that's not our forte, that's not what we do. And I'll admit my bias here as an Ottawa guy that a long time ago, we realized that the best option, the best recommendation to make us look good was the team at Fidus. Not only because they're North America, the first North American Premier Design Alliance member for Xilinx, and we're fully and heavily engaged with Xilinx, but again, just the breadth and expertise of the team they put together that have moved in and out over the years. As Cameron said earlier, typically folks who are Fidus folks are lifers and stay there for the duration of their career. And I would also state that it's not just with Xilinx where we would recommend intervention with Fidus. Across a myriad of supplier partners we have, and customers that run into trouble with those specific types of designs, we always recommend Fidus. And it's not a pass it over and then move away, because we like to engage on the back end with Fidus as they design the circuitry and select the components for all the reasons you read here. Tariff mitigation is a big reason now, but design for manufacturability is what we hear about most. And truly, from our experience with offshoring versus nearshoring, the nearshoring folks like Fidus have a greater respect for the manufacturability of the design to ensure that once that design is released, the customer can actually purchase the components that go in there and obtain them in a timely manner to reach their product market window as they see fit. So great partnership, very long-standing partnership, early intervention typically. And I will tell you that we've done many of these. We've had multiple customers across our bandwidth engage with Fidus, not one that has been disappointed that I've ever run across. So if this is something you're seriously considering, having that conversation with Nancy and Cameron and Scott definitely would go a long way to helping you understand the breadth of their ability. You can jump on to the next one, Veronica. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, folks, but we do, based upon that early engagement with Xilinx, we do have a myriad of customers who have at some point looked internally, whether it was because they had limited resources, because they had a very aggressive timeline that decided we need to do something outside of our own design team. And we've had several of them, and the example I'm using here decided that, hey, here's what the fixed price cost quote was from a designer. In this case, it was India. And it looked great based upon what was there. And what they came to realize, and I'll kind of summarize this, was that the soft costs associated with it, and Scott alluded to a lot of those soft costs in his slides, but the sheer number of calls, late night calls, when this happened, there was a lot of travel back and forth. So the soft costs that were associated really added up. And what the original quote kind of talked to the customer about, saying, hey, your design is going to come in on time at this budget, did not materialize at all. So it caused that customer, after multiple issues and back and forth, to finally get their product in multiple months late, but then realized that the process was good and then engaged with a nearshoring partner. And based upon the myriad of communication issues we talked about, that kind of all went away. A lot of those soft expenses disappeared, and the customer realized that choosing the correct partner for nearshoring in a pseudo local environment really helped them get their product to market quicker. In some cases, it was a full engagement we see from customers. In other cases, it's just the intervention where the expertise isn't there, and Fidus helps them out with one or two or three people. But can't state it enough. We've seen it on multiple occasions. Customers look at that one price because that's what the design is going to cost, and that adds up exponentially. And then Scott alluded to going back over and over, asking for added money for your budget. So we have seen that time and time again, and we see it less, and it's almost non-existent when you talk about nearshoring.
Great. Well, thank you, Albert. I feel we left the last to the best to the last, so to speak. So one last poll here. I know we are just hit 2 o'clock here, so we'll just quickly go through. But thank you, Albert, for sharing your experience. Fidus appreciates Avnet as a partner. We definitely enjoy working with you. So last poll is here. I want to thank our speakers. Thank you so much. Great job. Thank you for everyone who stayed with us to the end here. We've got some good questions, and I wonder if we should just touch base on a couple of them. Anybody that we haven't answered you, we'll definitely get back to you, but let's just do at least one specific question. Cameron, it's for you. Do you have a minimum size of project you consider? On mute. Sorry, Cam.
It's the quietest I've been all day. So I often joke that I sort of wish we did. However, what we found is a lot of our most staying long-term relationships have started as small opportunities, typically around something to do with consulting. Maybe it's a small signal integrity problem, that sort of thing. But again, relationships are built on how you handle the tough times. And when somebody comes to you desperate, needing something done, they're behind the 8 ball, their boss is coming down on them, they're going to miss their market window. They don't really want to hear that, $4,000 or $10,000 isn't enough. You only engage at 50 and up. I mean, the best example, we had a client in Burlington, Ontario, come to us with, actually, it wasn't even consulting. It was just to update a few small pads designs. I think it was about $4,000, just a couple little footprint modifications. They ended up being, I believe they did about $6 million in 5 years. And so again, we found, despite it being a little bit sometimes frustrating, we found more times than not, actually the smallest opportunities turn into the best long-term relationships. And from a purely selfish corporate perspective, the largest amount of revenue.
They're also some of the most interesting technically occasionally.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
All right. One last quick one, because it was added. How long would it take you to deliver a design that requires software, hardware, and FPGA? Scott.
So that's a loaded question.
That's why I thought I would save it.
So it depends on the complexity, of course, of what you're doing, but in the interest of time and everything like that, from requirements to first prototypes, we're probably talking between 4 or 5 months. If it's more complex, could be 6, 7 months. But yeah, 4 to 6 would be a good representative value.
Super. Okay, we've answered, actually, as we've gone along, quite a few of the questions. So those that have asked questions, we've answered them. So thank you, everyone that stuck around. We will follow up. You saw Cameron Scott's email addresses. They're available there. We appreciate your time. The Fidus team is ready and willing to work with everyone to ensure to keep your roadmap on track and productivity up during these times. Without further ado, have a great afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Albert. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Cameron.
Thanks, everyone.
Wow.